On the outset, let me thank the honorable jury and the honorable panelists here, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. My apologies on the late commencement of the proceedings here this evening, or this afternoon. I just heard Fizza say that the time allocated to me is 20 minutes. I will have to not read through this particular presentation, but which I'll leave to you to probably figure out at your leisure. But I'll try and communicate with you in both Urdu and English, and try and pass on to you the gist of the entire presentation of the entire paper which I have prepared today on this particular subject. बहादुर शाह जफर 4 दिन लेके आए थे, फिजा आपने मुझे सिर्फ 20 मिनट दिए, तो ये मोहलत गुनाह जो है ये बहरहाल देखते हैं इसमें क्या कर सकता हूँ. You see, I chose sociology in Islam as the first specific subject after the inaugural session that took place on the 7th of August on this platform called Think. And this became necessary because it is the bedrock on which all other issues are dependent. This is therefore the first specific subject to be taken up, because it is the evil of injustices in the laws we adopt that determine the health of a society. An Islamic society ought to be an exemplary society, and unless we figure where we have gone astray, where we have gone wrong, we will not be able to address the laws that need to govern us. I have therefore divided this submission into 3 parts, but which you will read at your leisure, as I said. But here I will take up with you this dialogue or this monologue, more so based on with the help of some charts that I have prepared. So Asif, if you can put up chart number 1. This particular chart will introduce you to a variety of things, and this is going to serve as the basis of the entire thesis. Now, we are only addressing a part of the thesis today, which is going to be relating to sociology and therefore social reforms in Pakistan. As you've already have been told, and right in the outset on the 7th of August, that the purpose of this entire exercise is to find a way for governance of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan in consonance with our ideology. All laws that societies adopt have to be based on a certain philosophy. And if your philosophy is contrary to your ideology, your beliefs, as is in Pakistan, predominantly our laws are have a philosophy, have a base of philosophy which the colonists brought with them. Now this has to be reviewed, the status of laws that exist and the laws that will get promulgated in the future have to be readdressed, and the status of the state has to be challenged to be given a fresh look to it. not because it's like changing of clothes, because it has become our need, because our societies are disintegrating into a very, very chaotic state of affairs in all sectors of life. So this particular chart is being introduced to you to explain to you the history of societies. You are aware that societies started with Adam and Eve, and their two children. They are not mentioned by name in the Quran, but Cain and Abel are two poles which determine a society or the existence of a society. And as the story goes, and as has been narrated in the Quran and in other scriptures prior to the Quran, Cain represents an economic interest. He is the first landlord in history. And Abel is rule and deprivation as captive labor on captive land. Now these are the two poles. Now these two poles determine the history of societies as have existed from the inception of history itself to date. Therefore, sociologists are of the opinion that Cain and Abel notwithstanding, recorded history starts from Sumer in the Nile Valley as the earliest recorded history, and has evolved in 27 stages, and according to our beliefs, with each messenger of God, say 124,000 stages, to where it has come to, and the latest civilization is referred to as the American civilization. Now, this view of the evolution of societies notwithstanding, we need to examine what are the ideals paradigm of a society. So when you go to this chart, you will see, and I would like you to see society as though it is in a circle. You will see that there have been two ailments in all societies from the times societies have come onto this planet, have come into existence, onto right now. And these two ailments have been extreme materialism, which you see on the left top of this particular chart displayed to you, and extreme mysticism. Now, these are like Cain and Abel, the two poles, the two ailments of society. We notice from history that the two figures you see at the bottom, that prophets, both Semite and Vedic, appeared on the planet or appeared in various societies on the planet at a time when societies had either leaned towards extreme materialism or had leaned towards extreme mysticism. And they came, or they were sent here to correct the balance. So we have society which leans towards extreme materialism or extreme mysticism, and the prophets came over to set the balance right, and the balance which they came about with as a common message was the establishment of material justice, to tell you what is the primacy of existence, and to define mysticism for you. Now this becomes very important for all of us to understand, because in essence, if you have a disorder of extreme materialism and extreme mysticism in societies, you create a leadership which is deformed, and you have your generations which inherit your leadership roles by creating role models from within a deformed leadership that exists in extreme mysticism and extreme materialism. So, to pass on a balanced structure for the next generation, it is imperative, it is necessary that we keep our view very firmly planted on how societies evolve and what is the judicial balance which ought to remain at all particular point in time. Asif, if you'll please go to chart 2. Now here I will give you an example of how the leadership who are role models, who serve as role models, figure. You will see on the extreme left that in the case of extreme materialism, the like of which you can see in Europe, you can see in America, is the first column. Or you can see in dictatorial rules, or you can see in monarchies. The attire is different. They wear robes, crowns, weapons, adornments, medals, special headgears, etc. Then they have titles to their names. They are called majesties, highnesses, excellencies, the like. Then they live in abodes which are like forts, fortification, palaces, castles, the like. Their economics is based on the occupation of the commonwealth of nature as a profit center. This is always an acquisition by basic usurpation, because the commonwealth of nature is to be shared by everybody. The religion which they follow is obviously anti-Masawat, and Masawat, as I understand, is basically material justice. I mean, is an equality which you enjoy for subsistence on the planet. Consequently, the leadership has a privileged position or place before the law. Now, similarly, in extreme mysticism, the attire are robes, beards, special headgears, a staff in their hand. Their titles are eminence, holiness, the like. Their abodes are mosques, chapels, monasteries, the like. Their economics, and this is very interesting, is condoning the oppression of the extreme materialist for a cost and being brokers of religious rituals and the hereafter. Again, here the religion is anti-Masawat and they are privileged before the law. You can't touch His Holiness inasmuch as you can't touch His Majesty. Now the balance which has been proposed by Islam, which unfortunately to date, as I will explain to you in this particular presentation, the attire needs to be that of the commoners. The leaders have to have an attire, that of the commoners. The titles, the leaders need to have to be addressed by their names and by their lineage. Their abodes need to live in abodes their compensation of labor permits them to use. Their economics should be based on the compensation of labor, as a salary is the criteria of leadership that occupies the public office on predefined criteria and mandates. The religion obviously is based on Masawat, which is across the board equality before laws. Now, having understood, I hope, this particular setup, we must see what the final message did to us. The final message was presented by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which finally gave mankind the balance, establishing for us a legal philosophy about mysticism and status of man as a bidimensional being, destroyed slavery, and above all established the social divide free of clerics, with knowledge based on research and development as the hallmark of human civilization, truly in service of human beings. He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, entrusted to the Ummah the high-tech of social science, which is way above the high-tech of material technology. You see, today the world is being governed on a political divide in territories called countries. And the basis of this particular divide is certainly not the ideology, is not masawat, is not the sharing of the commonwealth. On the contrary, it is based on your ability to materially subjugate population and usurp territorial limits. Now this is the basic difference between the hell of politics which exists today on the planet and which is against our ideology, we being this Islamic Republic, and what ought to be on the planet, i.e. a divide between ideological points of views, in the sense that if we have an ideology where we practice masawat, or we are required to practice masawat, we should look upon the rest of the world as the divide. We are sitting on the side of, a fence which will not interfere with the present state of usurpation, the present state of management of societies. Now, let's come down to religion. Religion basically is a social science, and I'm giving you these definitions because as we go further in this presentation, these definitions will become necessary. Religion is a social science. All these prophets who came to the planet came with one mandate. They were all shepherds in their period of time, and they came with one mandate on how to manage your societies. Now, religion therefore is or has been a social science on how to manage societies. Now, religion, as we see from the Islamic periscope, can be divided into two: monotheism and polytheism. Worship of one God, i.e. monotheism; worship of several, polytheism, or more than one God. This religion we have to carry the definition of religion a little further. Religion, though divided into monotheism and polytheism, have their highs and lows, and then there are two more additional categories to this, as we have seen on the planet. Religions which are deemed to be made by the Creator Himself, and religions that are man-made. For instance, one can safely say that Karl Marx had a bigger following than Jesus Christ alayhi salam, because of the extent of people or the population at that point in time when he emerged. So that is a religion too, but that is a religion which is man-made. We, as the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, need to follow an ideology which we presume and we deem is the religion given to us by our Creator. But when we go to examine history, we see that this particular religion, the religion of monotheism, compared with the religion of polytheism, is a failed religion. Now what does it represent? It represents, I'll see if I have a chart here for you. Can you bring to the screen chart 4, please? All right. In this chart, you will see that the level of civilization today, assessed as the latest civilization on earth, is that in the USA. And if you see the top box, which is in blue, it is based on materialism and material high-tech for social coexistence. Leaders are human gods who need to be worshipped by followers in both micro and macro context. Now this particular form of civilized level represents material high-tech, which you see the arrow pointing down to the green box, is for social evolution with disparity in coexistence representing polytheism. On the other hand, you have the Quran, which talks of coexistence where it is warranted by social high-tech, where inequitable justice is the hallmark. All people are equal for rights and duties, and they collectively worship one Allah and strive with material and mystic wealth to serve the collective body of society, i.e. Ummah. And they represent social high-tech, which is the box above, which is for civilization to evolve progressively with welfare for all, representing monotheism. Now one thing becomes very clear, that material technology must remain in servitude to social technology for the just welfare of the human race. Now this is not present at this point in time, and this is our quid pro quo in our relationship with the rest of the world. Because if you will see, can you bring up chart 5 please? If you will see this chart, you will see that the level of civilization which you have base other than the Quran represents a politics which denounces coexistence and protects a vested interest, which is essentially economic. And therefore, the recipe of control is doctored democracy. On the other hand, Sharia promotes tolerance to adopt by consensus researched human interest, i.e. through shura and ijtihad, and that is true democracy. So we have in front of us now the definition of society. We have the importance or the significance of the Sharia in comparison with the order, the economic and social order on the planet today. And we must therefore now swiftly move on to understand why we need to do this, why we need to revert to our ideology. So we will move now to explaining to you civilization. Please get me chart 3. Now, and I'm going essentially by what I have been able to derive from the Quran that human society in its history from Adam to date has had this particular divide. The round circle you see in the center is where society is located. Predominantly, human society is divided in this uneven ratio of 10 to 90, where 90% represent commoners in society and 10% represents the echelon of society. This 10% comprise of thinkers, scholars, writers, politicians, whatever else have you at any given point in time. And the 90% represent people who are basically followers of the 10%. Now, in each period of history, we have found, and this is a commitment of Allah, super intellectuals present in society. Now these dots you see in the top of this round circle are supposed to represent the super intellectuals, whether they are 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, but they are a very, very small number of people who can be counted on your fingertips. The Quran says that they have existed in all periods of time and they shall exist until the end of time. Now these are the people who have a level of knowledge which is above that of the 10%. These are the people who have always posed a threat to the 10% who govern human society. And therefore, these are the people who have been eliminated, martyred, killed, removed from the society by the 10% echelon. However, Allah in His wisdom enabled them in all periods of time to disseminate their level of knowledge by interacting with the 90% instead of the 10, and before they left for their heavenly abode. Now, the evolution of civilization is such and has remained such that every time the knowledge base of the 10%, when it moves down to the 90% commoners, it is presumed that civilization has moved a notch ahead. Now, this evolutionary process needs to be kept alive and at all periods of time. Because unless human civilization keeps evolving, the knowledge base will become stagnant and we will go into a mode of regress. With civilization, and before I move further, there is another thing about the 10%. They have consolidated themselves in history by institutionalizing their place in society. They have played Lord, King and God, as you can see in Surah Nas, and they have lost on all occasions, as has been evidenced in history again. Now, if human civilization is that important, then we need a society which is energized totally to keep moving forward and on a basis which guarantees human dignity, which guarantees tolerance, which guarantees being truthful, and above all, which guarantees a case against classes in society. And this is overly important because the essence of positive and negative society, according to Islam, can best be displayed in chart 6. Progress. In a positive society, progress is represented by communities engaged in research for the truth with tolerance and patience, prayer, justice, and jihad against the truth, spirit of coexistence and collective worship of one. This causes unity. This unity is probably the other name of the Ummah. In a negative society of shirk, which causes regress, there is captive labor, communities arrested and imprisoned in abject secularism, individual worshippers of many. This causes disunity, and this disunity is representative of regress. Now, I will take you to defining societies further. In an Islamic society, social technology and material technology, I've explained to you. Material technology is subservient to social technology. But in our days, this logic has, however, been hijacked in our days of intellectual attitude, because material profit is the incentive and motivation of life and the religion of our times. So most people have a notion that you only live once, so grab what it takes, all that you can, cap the acquisition and retire in indifference into a mean secular life free of sharing and concerns of coexistence and progeny. This scenario leaves us without a civil society. There is no civil society anywhere, India and Pakistan inclusive, and the predominant population of the earth are people who would do any act to the detriment of society for personal gain. This is the risk we are running with the societies who are made up of individuals like in the West and a few like them planted in the East. They are people who are reckless and would use any act of deception, double standards, and detestation of man and material outside their majority club to protect their vital interest, so-called. Ironically, this status quo is without a quid pro quo, and a social high-tech environment has been ignored as non-existent. The entire thrust of Islam towards monotheism is in fact directed against the creation of materially secular societies and individuals. Tawheed, the unity of attributes, the one of all, is achievable by a balanced applied structure of the primacy of existence, material justice, and mysticism. This is only possible where we change our course and revert to our ideology. The one Allah in His nature views man as a society, and this amply explains all of man's woes. Hunger, disease, slavery are all of man's own acquisitions. Collectively, there is a divine system, and individually there is mercy for man. If you choose to sacrifice your Ismail in submission to his command, the merciful will replace him with a sheep. This is our history. This is what we are following. Today, as we stand here, the questions of leadership, direction, destination are supreme. Where are we coming from? What do we do now? where do we go from here? I would like you to bring up chart 7. And we will see here a comparison between actual nobility and actual poverty for an individual in the society. Actual nobility is represented by the Muslim people are required to recognize success and achievement in life by pleasing Allah, or in effect in His image serving mankind. Therefore, the natural religion they follow is monotheism by social unity and equity. The natural activity is research and dissemination of knowledge, because if you want to serve mankind, you need to research and innovate the commonwealth of nature. The natural strength is obviously the truth. And this social status of people in their individual right is secular by Islamic frame of reference as well, but is conditioned essentially to obedience of Allah by public service and collectivity and coexistence. The judicial view is what I would like to draw the attention of the jury most. Society is more important than the individual, irrespective of his material worth or job. Compared to this is actual poverty, which we see on the planet. The Western or non-Muslim people please their own selves by recognizing success and achievement in life by material acquisition. The natural religion is polytheism in the visage of monotheism. Natural activity, research for personal economic gain, precipitating consumption. Natural strength, therefore, is deception, which the Quran refers to as the spider's web. Now, the social status of these people in their individual right is secular by Western frame of legal reference. And the judicial viewpoint, the individual is more important for who he is in material worth. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is basically what I had to communicate to you in the shortage of time that I have been allocated. And I would therefore emphasize on two things towards the achievement of these objectives. One is to understand the place where we have gone astray, and the other is the way forward. In where we have gone astray is in the upholding of the Trinity. The Trinity has had a history, and I will read to you, because there is a lack of choice in explaining this otherwise, of what I have written down. Primarily, monotheism represents unity of attributes. Polytheism represents disunity of attributes, the Trinity. It is Dr. Shariati's view that the attributes of ownership, when unified in God, represents monotheism, and when these attributes are disunited, it is polytheism, but in the guise of monotheism. This polytheism is a faith and the dominating faith in history. It is the opium of the people. This is contrary to monotheism, which is the blood, arms, nature and guide of the people, and history's condemned faith. Polytheism has a history starting from Cain, son of Abel, son of Adam. He slew Abel, usurped land, became a farmer. He restricted the use of land, destroyed the socio-economic order of Abel, which was based on sharing the commonwealth of nature. The unity was broken. People started worshipping Cain instead of God. Polytheism never refuted God, but introduced Trinity. The history of trinities has been defined best in the role of the pharaoh, the user of force, despotism, and politics. Croesus, user of bloodshed, exploitation, economics. Balaam, user of deception, brainwashing, faith. An inauspicious triangle, the Trinity has been the graveyard of all messengers, freedom fighters, and martyrs. It is an ill-omened chain which, like the chain of slavery, has been used to enslave the obedient of God to serve the rulers. It is like a three-way partnership, one responsible for propaganda, for robbing your pocket. The third gets a share of the profit for playing the spiritual man. He whispers the so-called heavenly words in your ears. And before you hear this, let me tell you that this is the whole reason why the institution of a cleric is absent in Islam. What does he say? He says, "Oh my brother, be patient. Leave this world to the worldly people. Suffer in this world in order to go to heaven during the hereafter. Even if you die of hunger, have tolerance." Had the people concerned with this world only known the rewards in the hereafter for being poverty-stricken and oppressed, they would have been envious of your future happiness. Nothing can be done. What is happening to us is your predestined faith. The poor are born poor and lucky ones are born lucky. Any objection is an opposition of God's will. So be thankful for what you have. Leave your judgments to the hereafter. Be patient and don't complain about your poverty and oppression, or you will lose the rewards of the hereafter. Don't forget that complaining about people is like complaining about God. The right of justice belongs only to God and not to people. Not in this world, but in the hereafter. Any judgments are to be made only by God. Therefore be careful so that you do not feel shame on the day of judgment. When you see Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, who forgives the oppressor, whom you did not forgive in this world. Everyone is responsible for his own deed. In order to persuade people to do well and prohibit them from doing bad, you must first be righteous and knowledgeable and effective. However, if you think it is dangerous, then you are not obliged to do it.
Agha Sahib, I have to just interrupt here. You've gone much beyond your time limit, so please sum up.
How much time do I have left?
Just 30 seconds.
That's about the time I need to return to my chair. Okay, these are the typical teachings of our so-called spiritual leaders serving the cause of colonialism and the trinity of polytheism. Since I have no more time, ladies and gentlemen, I will go straight to the conclusions so that we can sum up the objectives of this particular gathering. From what is the objective of having the seminar on social reforms, what is being sought here. Towards concluding this paper, I wish to observe that the sociology in Islam is a different paradigm. It is not manifest in the proliferation of rituals, sects, and superstitions. It is based on justice, and it is equally applicable across the board without discrimination. This justice is based on laws, and the laws are based on a philosophy that warrants freedom and liberties allowed by the Creator to the created. We need to protect the exercise of free will by man such that search and research of the truth remains his predominant engagement in life. Number two, we need to implement masawat, across the board equality before laws, denying the existence of privileges for sundry classes in society. In fact, we need to deny a class-oriented society altogether. We, in effect, need the equality of opportunity, and this is very fundamental, through a common standard for subsistence. This is most important for education, food, water, clothing, healthcare, and communication. These represent the basic human requirements for subsistence, and until we all share these levels equally, our opportunity will depend on man and not our individual merit. We need to assert material justice within as a social contract, and for outside our borders as a social contract for coexistence, again based on equality and material justice. We need to re-legislate the laws that have in the first place come about on an alien philosophy, challenging the liberties given by Islam. We need to labor more and pray less so that we can deserve what we desire. We need to institutionalize a democratic order based on shura and tempered by ijtihad for governance and governance by a non-partisan judiciary. We need most to adopt the Quran al-Hakim as our constitution and adjudicate by statutes promulgated anew with this big picture above in firm view. Thank you for your time and patience.